what really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are still open, 800-313-9443. One of our readers found a free copy of Atomic Cafe and posted it to whatreallyhappened.com. I've got about 6 emails who are sending in versions. Apparently, you can watch it over at Vimeo. And, yeah, that's your homework for tonight. Watch that documentary. There's going to be a quiz on it sometime in class next week here. So a lot of people, like myself, are very concerned that the United States is really not in a position to fight and win a new major war. Now, the conventional propagandistic wisdom is America has never lost a war, not counting that Vietnam thing. But the reality is we have not actually won a major war in 70 years. And contrary to what you will see in TV shows and movies, we didn't win World War I and World War II all by our lonesomes. In fact, in both cases, we were kind of late showing up. The government waited until they saw which side was going to win, and then they hopped on board. Remember in World War II, Italy started on one side, realized they were losing, killed their leaders, and joined the other side. So I'm looking at this article. This is out of Washington's blog. Beware the dogs of war. Is the American empire on the verge of collapse? And it starts with a wonderful quote from James Madison. Of all the enemies to public liberty, war is perhaps the most to be dreaded, because it comprises and develops the germ of every other. War is the parent of armies. From these proceed debts and taxes, known instruments for bringing the many under the domination of the few. No nation could preserve its freedom in the midst of continual warfare. That was James Madison. Look over the last 100 years of U.S. history. I'll save you time. Count the number of years we are not at war with somebody. Now, last night there was another major attack on Syria. Israel apparently flew in and dropped a bunch of bombs around Damascus. They're thumbing their nose at the Russian air defenses, saying, we were incredibly clever. We flew in through Lebanon and we were able to evade you. My read of the situation is that Russia held back from interfering out of a desire not to escalate the conflict with the United States, especially after all that yapping from McCain about how Russia must be destroyed. But Israel is a fool if they're going to rely on that for more attacks. Now, apparently Israel wasn't the only one who was out there pounding on Syria, and there's been a major, major whoopsie that is still not being reported on the corporate media. They're still going on about the mother of all bombs in Afghanistan. We gave them what for? Maybe that's why they did it. Distract from the story of this disaster down in Syria, because apparently coalition aircraft hit an ISIS chemical weapons depot. And the resulting cloud of toxic vapors have killed several hundred people. And this does prove that dropping bombs on chemical weapons depots is a bad idea, which undermines the second excuse that the U.S. had for attacking the Syria airfield. Oh, they had chemical weapons there we had to destroy. And then they showed a picture of a bunch of canisters saying, we blew these up. These were chemical weapons. Nobody around there was wearing decontamination gear, and it turned out those canisters actually held cluster bomb parts. Yet another lie. How do we know when the government's lying? Their mouths move and words come out. It also confirms, yet again, that the only chemical weapons inside Syria are those in the hands of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And where did they get them? Well, they got some of them from the United States of America. It's the same place Saddam Hussein got the poison gas he used on the Iranians. Several hundred civilians. And so far, not a word of it on the corporate media. They're just applauding the mother of all bombs. Look how butch we are. I think those guys are using this giant bomb to compensate for other insecurities. We're going to take a phone call here. Tom in New York. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Long-time watcher. I would like to pull Donald out from under the bus for a while. I have a couple of points. I could jump across them pretty quickly, I think. Just a week ago, everybody was saying he can't get his people in there. They're just going to bury him. What's he going to do? Nobody had any ideas. So suddenly we see this launch. Now, I looked at the BDA, and I know what the accuracy of our GPS military systems are, and they can hit something within about a meter. And if you look at where those missiles landed, there's a big long row, the whole length of the runway, about 200 meters past the runway. Now, even the civilian 6-digit GPS will get you within 10 meters, So there's something way wrong with that.
Well, it's entirely possible that Russia has shared with Syria some of their electronic countermeasures. We know that they're very, very potent from what happened to the USS Donald Cook.
Possibly, but that's kind of reaching.
I don't think so.
That's just one point. Well, maybe not. Maybe you're right, but let me go to the next point. All right, so he warned them, didn't he? Like an hour ahead of time was coming? And everybody left, apparently, because the original report was there was 4 to 6 people.
Well, no, you
didn't leave.
No, you don't. No, what you have here is the U.S. government did not inform Moscow of the coming attack. There was supposedly a message sent through that phone line where they're supposed to coordinate with each other, where the U.S. told Russia, don't have any of your planes around this airfield. And that was about the extent of the warning. But at least 9 people were killed, 6 of them civilians, and apparently at least one of them was Russian personnel.
Okay, well, it's $65 million at the very least in missiles.
80.
Not very effective.
It's $80 million. They go for $1.5 million a pop.
Yeah, all right. Well, I thought they were 1.1. But anyway, the point is, the thing is, he launched these missiles, and as far as I'm concerned, they did absolutely minimal damage. It looked to me like they intentionally missed everything, except the hardened bunkers that they knew they wouldn't go through. Yet there were at least 5 Nagoyan MiG-21s sitting out there, right out in the open, that they could have hit. There was a big string of Mi-24
Excuse me, Tom, I'm going to have to cut you off here because you need to go back and check your facts. First of all, there were 6 MiG-23s, and they were all destroyed. But those were antiques from the Vietnam era. And so basically Trump spent $80 million in Tomahawk cruise missiles to kill $4.5 million worth of antique aircraft. We're going to switch over to Milton in Pennsylvania. Aloha, Milton. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, it seems to me that everybody's waiting for like a great savior in Washington, D.C., and I think it's beyond hope that we're going to get a leader and leaders in Washington to do what the people want. And if I had it in my power, I would have 2, 3, 4 million people march on Washington, D.C. and say, clear out of the house.
It could well happen. It could well happen. Remember, we literally did have 1 million people march into D.C. to end the war in Vietnam. President Lyndon Johnson, in his memoirs, wrote that when he looked out the White House and he saw that crowd on the mall, that was the moment he realized they'd lost the war in Vietnam. And right now we have a country that is very angry at what is going on. We could easily see 4 million people descend on Washington, D.C. and just stand there and say, you stop this nonsense right now.
Absolutely, I agree with that. And I'll let you go on this question here. It's like somebody knows I went out shopping. They come and invade my home and rob me. What's protecting our country with all our women and men and all over there in seas fighting these wars? If we're hit, well, what's protecting us?
Well, we don't really have much protection. What we have is revenge, and that's that nuclear deterrent thing. Now, there are big, you've got the Air National Guards, you've got the naval forces. I mean, 100% of our military forces are not outside the country. It's, split between the defensive forces and the offensive forces. But the fact of the matter is this Moab bomb may be a bit of a bluster because our forces are overextended, our stockpiles are drawn down, our older weapons are just worn out, and the new replacements are overpriced junk. And the United States government may actually be just out there committing these acts of atrocity to try and scare the rest of the world into thinking we're this incredible monster, and the reality is that we're a paper tiger. And that could very well be the case. Okay.
We're coming out insane in everybody's mind.
Okay.
All right, Michael, I'll let you go. I just wondered that.
Okay, well, Milton, we're going to let you go. Thanks an awful lot. I want to get back to this. I had somebody who wrote in regarding that caller who was talking about all these other countries and they can't read and write algebra. How the heck did they get nuclear weapons? And he raises a point I thought about at the time and didn't say, but since other people apparently noticed it, I need to get back to it. These countries, this caller we're talking about, these Middle Eastern countries, who do you think invented algebra? So, little point here. Please don't call into the show if you don't actually have your facts straight. It just wastes everybody's time, and it annoys the hamster. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliate who's just now rejoining the network. Interestingly enough, Trump won't say if he signed off on this Moab strike. And personally, he's just saying we have given the military total authorization, which if I'm reading that correct, Trump has kicked on back and told the military, you do whatever the heck you want to do. And, of course, the military is going to go out and behave like a military, which is to put large holes in other people's property and bodies. And, again, every time they drop one of these huge bombs, they have to replace it. $66 million, I think, one of these things costs. They love the money. Another article coming on out here, this is from VoltaireNet, and it's making the observation that it looks like Italy might be the launching pad for the coming U.S. invasion of Syria. And it's basically chastising not just the United States of America, but all of NATO, just unanimous, ready to violate international law and commit mass murder, all wrapped in pretty flags. And they're all justifying it on the basis of absolutely, totally made-up nonsense, which is exactly how Adolf Hitler started World War II. First of all, with the Reichstag fire, which allowed him to grab much more power and personal authority, the way Erdogan is likely to do this weekend. And then the Gleiwitz affair, faking a terror attack on their own territory, blaming Poland for it, and marching them on off there. All right, let's see. Another phone call. Greg in Washington, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Well, since you're talking about nuclear weapons, I've read over the last year or so about different instances of tactical nukes being used in Yemen, Ukraine, Turkey, with analysis by people, analyzing the flares. Well, anyway, what do you think?
Well, I'd want to see the raw data on that. When the Moab was first developed, and I looked at how heavy it was, and I even raised the possibility that it was a propaganda device to conceal the use of small tactical nuclear weapons by saying, no, it wasn't a tactical nuke. We've got this really big bomb on the trailer, and that's what we used. And maybe that's what was used in Afghanistan, which is why the corporate media is doing nothing but showing footage from a 2003 test. Now, as far as determining if there's a nuclear detonation, what you need is a trace of the luminance pulse, because there's a very unique double flash signature to nuclear weapons. Because whereas chemical explosives, conventional explosives, will turn their own chemicals into an expanding cloud of high-pressure gas, a nuclear weapon does what it does by simply releasing a huge amount of energy, which heats the surrounding materials and causes them to expand. And what you will have is you will have the initial intense burst of energy coming out of the bomb, and it will literally burn the air around the detonation black. And then the blackened air will absorb more energy and start expanding outward rapidly. And so that very first instant of the detonation of a nuclear weapon, there's a double pulse in the light. And that's how you identify that you're looking at a nuclear weapon. Plus, in the aftermath, you go on in and you take radiation meters and you look for the various signature isotopes.
You know, what you're saying sounds similar to the analysis of what I read online about the bomb in Ankara during the supposed coup last summer. Anyway, you know, and then I read today that the United States has some 600 micro nukes.
Well, I'm not sure where you're reading this, because there has to be a minimum amount of fissionable material in a uranium bomb. What it's called critical mass. And if you're below that, you can get it to heat up. You cannot get it to sustain a chain reaction and actually explode with any kind of force. And even the hydrogen bombs and all those other multi-stage weapons in the plutonium bombs, they all have they have to have a minimum size. And I've always heard this story about a micro nuke that could destroy a building. Well, that's an awful lot of money to spend on a munition that only takes out one building. Now, when they talk about the so-called suitcase nuke, what they're really usually talking about is somebody has acquired a multi-stage weapon and they're taking that uranium trigger out and using it as a standalone weapon. And those are actually pretty small. They're not pocket size, and they wouldn't even really fit in a briefcase. But a large satchel or a large shipping container could definitely hold one.
Well, I just wonder. I think, naturally we're not getting the truth through our media, of course.
No, we're getting a lot of noise and everything. And, everyone's talking about nuclear missiles and everything. If somebody really wanted to carry out a nuclear terror attack on the United States of America, it is unfortunately alarmingly easy, and TSA grabbing our crotches isn't going to stop it. And I'm not going to share that on air now that I think about it. But but again, no country with nuclear weapons, whether it's Iran, Iraq, or North Korea, or anybody, or even South Africa, they are not going to launch an unprovoked nuclear attack anywhere on the United States of America or Israel, because it amounts to national suicide in the retaliation.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. At least it keeps little countries from being invaded, like Korea.
That's why they want these bombs. They're not building these bombs to be aggressive. They're building these bombs to be left alone. Okay? The North Korea wants nuclear weapons so it can make the cost of invading North Korea exceed the profit. That's all it is.
Yeah. You're preaching to the choir, Mike. I'm in your choir.
No, that's my wife's job.
Everything you say. Well, yes, I don't sing very well. Well, hey, Mike, good talking to you. I've been going to call you for years and finally decided to. Anyway, keep up the good work. Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. The phone lines are open. Okay, another little article here. This one's out of Sirlin News, or Silla News. Basically, it's saying the U.S. is getting ready to invade Syria to establish buffer zones. And we know that's nonsense. They're getting the idea of a buffer zone from Israel's tactics against Palestine, where they will commandeer land for an emergency buffer zone, then they'll build on it, then they'll say, well, we need a new buffer zone, and they'll grab some more land, and then they'll build on that and say, well, we need another buffer zone, and they keep just chewing away at Palestine over the time. What's going on in Syria is a plan that has been worked on for decades, and it certainly serves Israel's purpose. It's to carve a new independent Kurdistan out of parts of Syria, Turkey, and Iran, or rather Iraq. And that's what this is really about, because Israel's ultimate aim is for the Middle East map to be redrawn into lots and lots of little tiny countries that can be bullied and pushed around by Israel and its nuclear arsenal. And that's what's going on here. Now, we're going to take another break for commercials. When we come on back, more about the buffer zones and more phone calls. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're talking about this plan to establish what are being called buffer zones, but are in actuality the beginnings of carving out a new Kurdistan from Syria, Turkey, and Iraq. And again, the goal is to redraw the map of the Middle East. And if you look at the history of the Middle East, you'll see how much of that has always been drawn from outside. These aren't people who are setting up their own countries. The great powers come on in and they'll say, all right, here's the Middle East. We're going to draw a line here and here and here and here. And this is this country and this is that country, to keep them small and fragmentary and easy to control, because there's all that oil down there. We don't want them deciding for themselves what they're going to sell it for, which sort of fell apart when OPEC was created. Now, last night when I was watching TV and I was flipping through the channels, and I went past the 700 Club. And that's normally not something I would watch. But just as I was going past it, I heard Pat Robertson use the word Kurdistan. And so I stayed there. And he's basically out there using God and the Bible and everything to say that, oh, it's time for Kurdistan. There used to be a Kurdistan. We need to bring it on back here. Well, there used to be a Nazi Germany. I'm not ready to bring them back. But Pat was out there selling to his audience, yes, there has to be a Kurdistan here. And the first thing that goes through my mind is, Pat, whatever happened to thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's property, not to mention thou shalt not steal and thou shalt not kill? We're going to go back to the phones here. Steve in Michigan, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike? I'm just, watching everything that's going on, and it's like you're seeing all these mainstream outlets, and we saw the strike on Syria, and now they've announced it everywhere that the vessel's on its way to North Korea.
Yes.
And then we see this strike today with this mother of all bombs, and then they also, I seen an announcement, the SEAL team that took out Osama bin Laden is on its way also. So it's like all this stuff. I mean, if you're Kim over there, you're watching this, and I mean, this totally goes against this unpredictability that Trump always talked about on his campaign trail. And what it looks to me like they're going to do is, knowing that this April 15th is their celebration where they usually test missiles, they're probably going to use that as an opportunity to say, oh, he aimed it at Japan or he aimed it at one of our vessels, even if he doesn't. And
oh, yeah, there's going to be a false flag of some kind.
The strike.
There's going to be a false flag of some kind. Now, again, I want to caution anybody about talking about North Korea's reckless leader, because everything we think we know about North Korea and its government has been told to us by the same corporate media and government that told us Saddam Hussein had nuclear weapons, that Ahmadinejad wanted to wipe Israel off the map, and so forth and so on. We cannot trust any of it. All we can trust is our events we're actually seeing, which is the U.S. invading, drone-striking, regime-changing countries all over the planet right now. And again, any leader who is looking at the behavior of the U.S. government and ignoring what they say is going to be working on building up their defenses and creating a deterrent to being invaded. Now, I agree with you. I agree with you. The North Korea situation could get wildly out of control. Apparently, the Carl Vinson battle group, or Trump's armada, will be in position on Saturday.
And that's the day, right?
Well, that's the day they're on position.
Testing their weapons.
That's the day they're in position. I would assume something is going to happen very, very soon thereafter. But there will be a false flag of some kind. Either the U.S. will set off a nuke someplace and say, look what North Korea was trying to hit Japan or Hawaii and they missed, but conveniently it was close enough where people got lots and lots of pictures of the mushroom cloud, or some such nonsense. There's even talk about how Kim Jong-un is going to loft one of his nuclear weapons into the skies over the U.S. and black out the power grid. I mean, they're just trying everything out there to make it look like we are in such danger. And it's an exact repeat of how Adolf Hitler got his people hot and bothered to invade Poland, with the attack on the Gleiwitz radio station. Or the same thing during the war in Iraq. Saddam has nukes. Tony Blair was telling the people of Great Britain that Saddam was going to attack with biological weapons with only 45 minutes' notice. How many times do you have to be lied to before you understand you are being lied to about everything? Steve, got to let you go. Taking a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to do a couple of news stories before we go back to the phone lines here. Now, as you know, the United States launched 59 missiles at that Syrian air base, of which only 23 actually hit the air base, and as that other caller pointed out, most of them just seem to hit open ground. And either the quality of our Tomahawks matches the quality of the F-22 and the F-35, or Russia has shared their electronic jamming technology with the Syrians, and they were able to GPS spoof those Tomahawks someplace else. Remember that Iran managed to capture a U.S. drone by spoofing its GPS location, and the drone thought it was landing back at its base, and it was actually landing in Iran, and they got hold of it, and now they've copied it, and they have their own domestically produced drones now based on that technology. Now, we know that some of those cruise missiles that missed the airfield hit 3 nearby villages, killing more civilians, more children. Russia is claiming that they shot down most of the rest. And apparently, Russia is already replacing the aircraft that were destroyed on that Syrian air base. And no, they're not getting new MiG-23s. They're getting much more modern, up-to-date, much more capable aircraft as replacements. All right, let's take some phone calls. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I'm just wondering, you think Russia's going to allow us to invade Syria, or do you think they're going to draw their own red line? I understand they already did kind of draw their own red line. I just can't think. Even if Putin wants to let him do it, he's got hardliners back there like this guy Sharanovsky.
Yes.
I don't think Sharanovsky's going to allow it. You know?
Yeah, Putin. There's going to come a point where Putin is going to have to stand firm or risk being removed from power by his own government, and that is why we are in such a perilous situation. Just like the United States has hardliners like Lindsey Graham and John McCain, the Russian republics have theirs as well. Of course, for these people, it's all theoretical. It's all fun and games. They're not going to be on the front lines. Their children are not going to be on the front lines. And so,
we'll all be on the front.
Say again?
Well, Mike, we're all going to be in the front lines because it's going to go. You know, it's going to go nuclear because what's going to happen is the Russians are going to defeat the NATO forces, the Israeli forces, whoever else in that area. They're an excellent army. They're motivated. And what would happen then is probably, especially since I think Trump isn't all there, kind of almost like McCain. I'm getting the feeling now he's nuts himself, and they'll stop launching nukes, and that's it. Goodbye.
Well, you know? I don't know if Donald Trump is nuts or if he's just being controlled. The important thing is the public image going out to the rest of the world is the U.S. government is nuts. They're reckless, they're impulsive, they're willing to fling weapons in all directions without regard to the consequences, based on fictions and wishful thinking and make-believe. That somehow the fact that other countries are building nuclear weapons to prevent us from invading them justifies immediate invasion. And that that's making the whole world very, very dangerous. Anyway, Steve, I need to let you...
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, Steve, well, it sounds like the dogs have calmed down, so do you have one more thing?
Yeah, I think that bomb, by the way, that they dropped today, this is trying to scare other people, but they understand is everything I understand is Russia has just this kind of bomb even be more powerful. So I mean, you know, it was done basically for show, and God knows how many innocent people might have been killed by that thing.
I absolutely agree, and given that they're not showing the actual strike in Afghanistan, and they're still pounding it here, the biggest non-nuclear bomb, and I'm almost wondering, did they use a nuke, and they're trying to say this is what they used, and they show that 2003 footage, because whatever country actually uses nuclear weapons first is definitely going to lose in the court of public opinion around the entire world. I don't know what the purpose of this was. In fact, again, they may have dropped this on Afghanistan in farming country just so the media had something to report that was not the coalition strike into Syria last night that killed several hundred innocent civilians by hitting an ISIS chemical weapons factory. Again, think Bill Clinton's cruise missiles into Sudan when Monica Lewinsky testified, or the invasion of Grenada 24 hours after the Beirut bombing. These things get done all the time. This could be more of the same.
Yeah, because there's no way I believe that chemical attack was nothing but either a false flag or, like you said, they might have hit a weapons factory. But where did they get those weapons from? Now, we know that the CIA has been smuggling weapons into Syria from through Turkey and probably coming from Libya.
We have the paper trail. We have the paper trail. You know, they were coming from the United States of America. In fact, WikiLeaks just put out another Hillary Clinton State Department email in which she's saying that Al-Qaeda in Syria is on our side.
By the way, did you hear that? On my way home, I heard that fool who's the head of the CIA now, I think it's Pompeo, basically insulting Assange and insulting two patriots, Assange and Snowden. I mean, it's getting me. This is getting me disgusted. I almost long for Obama. I mean, that's how bad it's getting.
Well, I'm not at that point yet. You know, what I'm longing for is an asteroid to hit Washington, D.C. and Tel Aviv. That's what I'm longing for. And I would miss getting a chance to see all those great museums, you know, but I'm willing to make the sacrifice. Okay, Mark, we're going to let you go. We got a bunch of calls here. Werner in New Brunswick, aloha, what is on your mind?
Oh, Michael, I was listening there for the last hour, and you have to get yourself another bad boy. You can blame for past history. I was being brought up in Germany where the media was being controlled by the Allied forces with the same BS. But now the original archives are available about the timeline of the events and so on. And since you mentioned that Zena Gleiwitz, that we were being told in the old country that it was a false flag. But what I've been finding out, it was through torture extracted at the Nuremberg trials, where they tortured the witnesses so that they would tell whatever the interrogators wanted to hear.
Yes.
And in the foreplay of the Second World War, you people in North America, and you, especially you in Hawaii, you probably did not know how many thousand German civilians who were living in the territories that, at the Versailles Treaty, were being taken away from Germany, how many thousands of those civilians were brutally tortured and killed. Their farms were being torched and everything else. And Hitler had appealed to the League of Nations to send troops there to protect the population. In Poland, you know, that in the German territories in Poland and in Czechoslovakia, the Datenland.
Okay, Werner, no, I actually know all of this, and I know that Hitler was forced to do what he did because the League of Nations abandoned its responsibility. And yes, Poland was doing a lot of terrible things. But the point is, we're talking about how false flags are used to manipulate public opinion. And Werner, we're going to let you go here. And we're going to switch over to Dan in Texas. Dan, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Mike, myself, from the get-go, going back into last summer, I never believed that Trump wasn't controlled by whoever you want to call them, the globalists or Goldman Sachs. And from the get-go, from the appointment of particular persons to his cabinet, full of Goldman Sachs types.
Yeah, I know.
And so I never believed it to begin with. And the one thing I wanted to say is I very rarely ever catch in on Alex Jones, but I just was curious, so at 11 o'clock today I tuned it up. And boy, what a major contortionist he has become for justifying Donald Trump.
You know, I have gotten so much email about that where people are just saying they're as disappointed in Alex Jones as they are in Donald Trump. And I've gotten a lot of email that is praising me for saying, yeah, I'm not in love with the guy anymore. I'm hearing a lot of noises from the other room. Hang on a second. Do we have a new family member? Claire, do we have a new family member? I think so. We're expecting a new family member, and from the noises I'm hearing over there, I think it just arrived. So we'll update.
You mean like a child?
Yeah, from one of our nieces.
How about that?
Yeah.
Well,
Little bright spot of happiness in all this. Little bright spot of happiness in all this dark world of gloom and danger and everything, and so we'll be updating on that one. Anyway, listen, Dan, got to let you go here, and we got a lot of news that we need to get through, especially with all this nonsense about Korea. Now, Putin is vowing that he will prevent color revolutions, not just in Russia, but all of its allies. And, of course, we have come to understand that the phrase color revolution means a covert overthrow from outside by Western interests primarily centered on George Soros and his non-governmental organizations. Russia's already banned them all. They've kicked them out of Russia. They caught them trying to stir up trouble, the same way that they've been stirring up trouble here in the United States of America, destabilization campaign, and the same way they were doing it all over Europe, all over Ukraine. Other countries are starting to crack down, like Hungary, and we even have this spectacle of the European Union going into Hungary and demanding the people of Hungary oppose their own government's efforts to prevent a coup d'etat. I mean, that's how bizarre this whole thing has really become. So, good for Putin on that one. All right, so let's talk about North Korea, because this is giving us all nightmares out here in Hawaii. It is being reported by places like CNBC that North Korea could conduct its 6th nuclear test as early as Saturday. Everything seems to be coming on down there. They're saying it's poised to go ahead. And what's really interesting is this quote from CNBC. North Korea may undertake more nuclear activity as early as Saturday in response to Washington's talk of preemptive strikes on the rogue nation and the strategic deployment of a U.S. aircraft carrier. Folks, North Korea is not the rogue nation. The United States is. Look at its behavior and actions. Don't listen to the propaganda. North Korea isn't the country that's been going out, sticking its nose into other people's countries and trying to change the government, which is exactly what they're trying to do in North Korea. The U.S. attitude toward North Korea is, how dare you build a weapon to stop us from invading your country? We're going to invade. And by the way, I'm noticing that on all of this anti-Russia, anti-North Korea, anti-Syria, anti-Afghanistan propaganda, the corporate media is now disabling all commenting. Apparently, too many people were getting on board and saying, this is just utter nonsense. Now, Beijing, despite the fortifying of its border with North Korea, and its warning that if North Korea crosses that border, that China will launch attacks, Beijing is still warning the United States against an attack on North Korea, saying it will be riskier than the attack on Syria. And China is saying that Washington needs to accept the reality that it does not have the power and means to organize global affairs, to stable them down. Everything that they're doing is making the world more chaotic and more dangerous here. Japan is making preparations to evacuate their citizens from South Korea over the rising fear of war, under the expectation that if anything goes into North Korea, North Korea is going to retaliate, at least in part, with an attack on South Korea. And what we've got is the irresistible force against the immovable object. Donald Trump and his armada, Kim Jong-un and his nuclear weapons. Neither one appear ready to back down. And apparently North Korea is expecting that there will be an attack. And we are getting reports from Pravda that Kim Jong-un has ordered the evacuation of his capital city, Pyongyang. Now, North Korea, because of all this talk of invasion and war for decade after decade after decade, and the fact that the First Korean War, which is another war the United States did not win, I might add, never officially ended. They've always been technically, legally at a state of war. And so North Korea has built an amazing complex of bomb shelters under their cities. Now, they are not large enough to accommodate the current populations, and so apparently the rules are that only people who do not have a criminal record are going to be allowed into the bomb shelters. Which, as criteria go, seems relatively practical here. Now, the reason Kim Jong-un is doing this, we've all been told about the Carl Vinson and its aircraft and the guided missile destroyers and the other fleet auxiliaries. But apparently, the latest report we're getting is that the United States has deployed a cruise missile submarine to join the fleet. And what that is, following strategic arms reduction treaties, the United States government had 4 Ohio-class ballistic missile submarines that were no longer allowed to carry Trident nuclear missiles. And these are the biggest nuclear ballistic missile submarines that we have. And they have 24 launch tubes. And so what the Navy did is they took these 4 submarines, and the Trident missiles obviously were taken out. And into each of the Trident launch tubes, they put a rack that can hold 7 Tomahawks. Now, 2 of the Ohio tubes were used for other purposes, cutting the number down to 22. But this means each one of these 4 submarines can carry 154 Tomahawk missiles, each of which can carry a nuclear weapon. And apparently one of these is being deployed off the coast of North Korea. So all the pieces are in place. All the United States needs to do is set off a nuclear bomb someplace, claim it was North Korea, and World War III will be on. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And speaking of submarines, of course, we have to raise the concern that North Korea has launched at least one of their new Sinpo-class missile submarines. Now, of course, it's nowhere near as capable as the Ohio class. It only has 2 launch tubes. But only one nuclear bomb can wreck your afternoon. And supposedly the missile it is designed to carry has a 500-mile range. And there are others apparently being constructed. But we're hearing all this hue and cry all of a sudden that the U.S. has somehow managed to lose track of many of North Korea's submarines, which, I don't know. They may be setting us up for, again, a false flag. Big bang. Oh, a North Korean submarine fired a nuke over here, and thank goodness it missed, but everybody on the beach got pretty pictures of the mushroom cloud. Something like that. I don't know. But at this point, given the world's negative reaction to Trump's actions in Syria and Afghanistan, there has to be something to just really sell the idea that North Korea deserved what is about to happen. We are hearing now, somebody just posted an article, this mother of all bombs. Apparently Russia does have a larger non-nuclear bomb. It's 4 times as powerful. And then there are the fuel-air explosives, where there's, in theory, no upper limit about that one. The size of that one, rather. Everybody's rattling around. Let's see, there was something else here I wanted to look at. Russia's expressing horror at the hundreds of civilians killed in last night's attack that bombed an ISIS chemical weapons depot. And again, not a word on the corporate media. Just a lot of, be afraid of Korea. Kimchis are coming. Oh, by the way, little update. Yes, Claire and I have a brand new grandnephew. It's over in California, so I can't do the coochie thing. But I'm a frustrated daddy, so I'm always glad to see other people getting children. Claire and I are the world's greatest uncle and aunt. We really are. All right. So, moving on forward here. Apparently, Nigerian police have managed to foil a coming terror attack on the UK and U.S. embassies in that country that was scheduled to take place on March 25th and 26th. So, little terror here, little terror there, all over the place. Article coming out of Press TV says U.S. oligarchs have taken control of the Trump administration. This is according to E. Michael Jones. He's a political analyst here in the United States of America. He lives in Indiana. And everyone has noticed this incredible, almost instantaneous transformation of Donald Trump from somebody who wanted to restore relations with Russia and stop the U.S. interventions, and all of a sudden he's this gung-ho war hawk. And I keep making jokes about how they went over to the Westworld laboratories and they made up a pro-war Trump to replace him with. But I'm looking at that comment where, I'll tell you what, I'm going to save this until after the station break. We'll be right back.